You're listening to Healing Voices Project, where we share stories and the latest information from people who fight addiction every day. I'm Mike Torville, your host and author of Voices from the Fallen. Thank you for listening, for following, and most of all, for sharing with people you care about. Make your voice count too. Hello, everybody. Thanks for coming back to Healing Voices Project. I'm Mike Torville, your host of the program, and today we have Anaamika Nair as our guest. Anaamika is a program director for the Springfield Stop Access Coalition. That's within the Gandara Center, downtown Springfield. Anaamika works to reduce underage substance use by focusing on community coalition, building, and education for both youth and parents. And I think this prevention is very important, obviously. In fact, we were at the HCAT meeting, the Hamden County Addiction Task Force meeting.
Yeah.
We talked a lot about prevention yesterday, so that's in my mind, so your timing is perfect. So, Anaamika, thanks for coming on.
Of course, yeah, and
Sure.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah?
Is there anywhere you want to start first?
Sure, yeah. Well, there's so much because we're going to talk about your work,
Right.
the Gandara Center, Stop Access Coalition. In fact, you have a background in coalition building. And I want to talk about what that means and your background and everything. But before we get into your work, but let's talk about you a little bit, right? So people get to know you. Mm-hmm. Where you come from, what brought you into this line of work. So you're here in Massachusetts now, obviously.
Yep.
But you didn't come from Massachusetts.
No, not at all. I was born and raised in California.
Mm-hmm.
I lived in the Bay Area, so San Francisco area most of my life. And then when I was 18, I moved here to Massachusetts for college.
Who would ever do that?
I did. I definitely did.
So-
I was surprised about the seasons. You really do have 4 seasons here,
Yeah.
but I also came the 2020 pandemic, so that's when I started college.
Oh.
My first semester I was in California, remotely doing college, and then I went to Massachusetts my second semester.
Remotely at the Massachusetts
At UMass Amherst.
At UMass Amherst.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was a very unique start to college life itself, and so with that came increase in just this generation's mental health, like lack of connection, like complete disconnect from the world, both physically and like mentally.
That time, the pandemic,
Right.
put mental health front and center.
Right.
Didn't it?
It really
Yeah.
did. And so I was, not only that, but I was thrust into a new space.
Mm-hmm.
And my second semester I was on like UMass Amherst campus, and I did 2 more years there. So I actually I did my undergrad in 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that, I ended up studying and majoring in political science and African American studies.
Mm-hmm.
So it was actually the extracurriculars I did outside of my classes that really took me into coalition building, most specifically the Restorative Justice Task Force at UMass and the Afro-Am Undergraduate Council. These are just like horizontal coalitions, which mean that there's no hierarchy. And so I really liked that. It gave me a space to explore. It gave me a lot of connections, but it was really centered around community, like building capacity. And the Afro-Am department at UMass, like it was the best space I could have ever been in. And the department itself comes out of a tradition of activism. It comes out of people fighting for space, fighting for them to be seen, and I was really inspired by that. And so I was very involved in the school, whether it be within the different organizations, as I wrote articles in magazines, I was attorney general, I was a conduct advisor, but I really was always just brought back to the more coalition building side of whatever I did. And then I graduated, and I was like, oh, what do I do?
Now, but you mentioned political science, too.
Yeah.
And political science, community building, activism, they're all
Right.
sort of related, right?
Yeah.
And but something pulled you into that that end of things, the activism and the community building.
Yeah.
And you said you were inspired by what?
I was inspired by the feeling I get when I'm around community, like who cares about me and who I care about. There were a lot of times when myself as well as many people just felt a lack of connection, a lack of the ability to feel that they were cared about. And so the reason why I put myself in spaces like the community building spaces, like coalition spaces, is because that's where I felt like I was being able to be truly myself. And because that kind of gave so much to me, it was only like I just gave back, and I kept giving back. And I'm also a very outspoken person. I'm very extroverted, and I care a lot about many issues. And so I focused on hunger and homelessness. I focused on prison abolition. I wrote my thesis on some kind of abolitionism. These are just things that are very important to me. And so I focused on everything I could have, because a lot of people told me you can't, like, when you grow up, you can't focus on all of these things.
No.
And so.
Do you feel you've grown up yet then?
I don't think it's worth growing up if that's where I have to go, because I honestly feel like I do focus on all of these things. Right.
You're trying hard to.
I really am. And so it's a place where both in college, my extracurricular work, and now, like, post-graduation, I feel like I'm able to work on what I want to. And even though it's not the same as college, the work that I do touches every part of people's lives. And so what drew me to prevention is, actually, I wanted to go to law school.
I was going to say, because political science, and then you wanted to go to law school, because often political science, law school, they kind of follow each other.
Yeah, so I did want to go to law school. Through undergrad.
It's not too late. You can still fit it in.
On top of the 7 million things I'm doing. But
exactly.
I decided on the more nonprofit, but specifically prevention area, because what prevention is kind of pinpointing some challenges, some issues, something in society at large that you really don't want to continue. And it's not necessarily stopping the issue right there. It's preventing it from ever happening. So what is a world without people who are unhoused? What is a world without people who are addicted? And I think a lot of people, or many people, it's like I live in the world where my imagination can come true. And so if I can imagine it, I really do think it can come true. And it's hard. It's really hard, and I don't expect my works individually to do it, but that's why I'm so big on community coalitions and community building, because together you can do it. It's definitely possible, and it's not one solution. It's many different solutions for different groups of people that all work towards the same goal. So that's why I love prevention. That's why I'm in prevention, because there are certain issues or topics in society that we're saying shouldn't be there, and I agree. And I'm saying, how do you make it never happen?
Do you feel like, I'm going to ask this because I already know the answer. Do you think that's too idealistic of an approach to that, a mindset? Like, I want to prevent all of this. I want no more homelessness, no more drugs, no anything. You're never going to achieve that, are you?
No, and I am idealistic, and I don't mind being in that, because I think that's part of what helps me continue working.
Well, and believe me, and it was a stupid question in one way to ask, but I ask it for a reason, because, and I think of, it's as an old story, an old analogy, the starfish story, about throwing the one starfish back,
right.
There's a million. And the bottom line of that, it mattered for that one.
Right.
So you may not see the success. You might not accomplish absolute prevention.
Right.
In the country.
Right.
In the city, in a community, in a neighborhood. But you can for individuals. You can for groups of people. You can in small, and that's an accomplishment in itself.
Yeah.
And even preventing one person, one group, and knowing that you've made some success there makes a difference.
Exactly.
Right?
That's what's
the difference.
important for me. And over time, I think the issue is, what happens if you don't have any idealistic people? right? It's
Pretty pessimistic world if you
right.
don't, right?
Not only that, but prevention just really wouldn't exist. I'm not saying that this work isn't hard, that there are not nights that I really am just like staying up very late, grueling over this work. It's something where my idealism can kind of it can go up and down, but it really is my discipline. Like that is what keeps me going. And so it's work that I feel like everybody should do. And everybody does in one way or the other, right? You have people who do have maybe one or two important people in their lives. Like those are the people's lives that you touch, and your morals, your values, the words that you say to them affect them. And so I do that just for I do that for my job. So I just end up talking to more people, and you either affect people a lot or you do a little bit, and you just keep going every day, little by little. That's how.
And it's hard to prove. It's hard to demonstrate what you've accomplished, because you can't. Going back to another analogy, you can't prove a negative. You can't prove that something didn't happen.
Right. I can't prove this person would have ended up here.
Right. However, I think you can see the effects through data.
Right.
Right. And we talked a lot about this yesterday, the data, and Paul and Ananda Lennox, both of them who've been on this program,
right,
I've talked a lot about that. And I thought, well, that's interesting, because the data does tell a story, and it does demonstrate some level of success. Do you see that as well? And,
yeah.
And what do you see in that data over the few years you've been doing this?
So the data is one thing about data. Data tends to lag behind reality, right? We collect data for a year, then we analyze it for a few months, and then we put out the report, and many people try to they make inferences, and that's also how we're funded, right?
It has to drive what you do next.
It drives what we do next. But what we do see is that in reality, many more than 50% do not use substances of youth, right? We see the fact that it's the majority who aren't. And we are able to understand risk factors. We can understand what exactly through data has been shown to correlate to risky behaviors, And a big thing for me was our data, the 2022 Prevention Needs Assessment Survey, right? And again, making inferences and looking at all of the data, I saw that when youth, and I work with youth 13 through 18, if they have one mentor in their life that they can really trust, they are less likely to engage in substance use or other risky behaviors.
Okay, and let's talk about that.
Yeah. One
mentor could come in different shapes and sizes, right?
Exactly.
It could be one parent.
Right.
It could be a friend or a friend's or a teacher, right?
Yep.
A coach, and so on.
Exactly.
But having that adult connection is, I guess, what you're referring to, right?
Yes. Yeah. So it's one. It doesn't mean it has to be your parents.
But at least one.
And I think the difference is when you have peer-to-peer, very meaningful connections, that's great. That's also a protective factor. But having that adult is that you trust, is you're able to, as a youth, and again, this is me making a little bit of inference, but you're able to have the space of time and the little bit of clarity. And if you're a young person, being able to trust this other adult, you take their words seriously. And you said, well, maybe I shouldn't do this because in 10 years I won't be able to go to college, right? If I engage in risky behaviors. And that's what I really want to be able to do. And that's how you impact people. You really allow them to engage in delayed gratification, right? So substances are like immediate gratification. You get that high, you get that buzz, but you won't necessarily be able to do X, Y, or Z in the future.
As a result of that. Right?
Exactly. Right. And if you are a trusted adult, and if you are able to kind of help youth move in the direction that allows them to achieve their goals, you're engaging in something that's very, very, very hard for youth to do. Developmentally, it's extremely hard to, even for adults. How many times, would you rather spend the $5 rather than investing or putting it somewhere, right? You want your little coffee.
You want your immediate gratification.
Exactly.
That's all. And we're all programmed that way now.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, the small bit of dopamine and,
right.
Just access to screens, access to screens are also, or just generally social media, like are giving underage youth access to gambling, access to like you can like DoorDash alcohol, right? And that's a huge issue, because if you use a credit card that someone's over 18 or something, they just drop it off at the door. Mm-hmm. And if it's at your house, then you're assuming that someone over age is paying for the mortgage.
You're assuming that.
You're assuming.
And they want to make money, so they're ready to deliver.
Exactly.
Right. So hey, we're not going to question this.
Right. And then the people who are delivering are also trying to make their own money some way. So they're not even going to. They don't care who opens the door.
Right.
Even if it is a child.
Right.
So those are things that you're combating today.
And it goes back to the parental guidance or the mentor that you refer to, because even and so let's just say that going back to data, and I hate to use that because it sounds so clinical to say, but personally, if you think about this, the difference between a person having a mentor or not having a mentor, what is the difference in later substance abuse? I mean, in other words, statistically.
I don't have the exact, but it's significant. It's significant. It's a significant difference. Yeah. You have a significant difference in people, because my understanding is you have one mentor who is not just that one person, but gives you access and opportunities to other things that you may be interested in. Also, if you have that mentor, they know about you. So I know you like sports. Here are some scholarships. I know you like this. Here's something that's very related to that one topic. Versus like people who don't know you but are authority figures, that's different. They don't know you, and you don't necessarily have that personal connection.
It's really having a connection.
Right.
And it's such a simple thing.
Right.
But it makes a massive difference.
Exactly.
Doesn't it?
Yeah.
Now, with this, and by the way, I mean, we're going to talk about the Springfield Stop Access Coalition a little more specifically and what you do there.
Right.
But these are the types of things, and this is part of the Gandara Center.
Yeah.
And we'll just mention, because I don't want to forget to mention, the Gandara Center. Let's mention what the Gandara Center does. Been around for 40-something years, right?
Yeah.
And tell a little bit about the Gandara and the Stop Access Coalition, and then we'll dive into more of some prevention topics and things like that. So anyway, I hate to shift, but I don't want to forget to talk about the Gandara Center.
No, of course.
And the Springfield and the Stop Access Coalition.
No, of course. It's my understanding, or the way I see it, is a pretty large nonprofit. And I love that for many, many, many reasons. There are so many programs. So we have, within the prevention division at least, which is where I work, there is the Springfield Family Resource Center, Westfield Family Resource Center. We have PrEP, or like the teen pregnancy program, so talking about healthy sexuality, financial well-being. We have youth gambling, so stopping youth gambling. We have, I don't want to forget, MTCP, which is the Massachusetts, like preventing tobacco use and looking at tobacco.
And the Gandara Center is Western Mass?
It is Western. Yeah, it's in Springfield. It's based in Springfield, but it has locations all over Massachusetts. They have locations eastern, like all the way, I think, like even to Hyannis and Eastern Mass. It started here, I believe, or this is kind of like a home base.
Okay.
But it's huge. It's all over Massachusetts. So they run many programs. Besides the prevention division, there's housing, there are clinical clinical treatments, there are there's a lot of programming that just goes out through all over Massachusetts. And it started smaller, as everywhere does, and over time they've just gained more locations that do, it's essentially like a large behavioral health kind of space and nonprofit space where a lot of it, I think, is tackling issues that I tackle in Stop Access, but in different ways.
Yeah, and I know we worked with some people at Hope for Holyoke, which is, I think, also part of the Gandara Center, right?
Yes.
And the Stop Access Coalition in Springfield,
right,
is where you spend your days.
I do, yeah.
So let's talk about the Stop Access Coalition, and we'll dive back into the prevention. But tell us about the Stop Access Coalition, and then what a day looks like for you and what you're doing there.
Yeah, so Stop Access Coalition is a coalition within the prevention division at Gandara, and what we are funded by the CDC, and we're also funded by the Stop Act. So what that means is that I'm following a bunch of grant guidelines, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And so day to day, I work to reduce and prevent underage alcohol, cannabis, tobacco, and like those kinds of products in ages 13 through 18, so 8th through 12th graders. Day to day looks very different, and that's part of why I love my job. But the community engagement, I'll talk about a day where I am doing a lot of community engagement. So that might mean in the morning, I go to a neighborhood council meeting and I talk about what we're doing, and then I go to like the Hampden County Addiction Task Force meeting where I'm working with prevention professionals and people in this space. And then in the afternoon, I'll go to my youth advisory board. So I have a youth advisory board now who it's made up of youth that meet at Duggan Elementary on Mondays just for 1 hour, but we go over lesson plans that really engage the students about what substance use does to your mind, body, and they talk about what interests them, and so I kind of go off of them.
These are high school students.
These are high school students, and so hopefully at the end of in October, Substance Use Awareness Month, we will showcase individual projects that they're doing that talk about substance use and kind of like the harms, and so kind of like in a harm reduction way. So I'll do that, and then we'll work with public schools to offer education, particularly like vaping education. So if you are caught vaping in school bathrooms, because now some Springfield public schools have vape detectors, we will...
What is a vape protector?
Detector.
Yeah. So what is a vape detector?
It is...
How does it work?
I don't exactly know how it works, right? But my understanding is that it's placed in bathrooms, and if a student is vaping in the bathroom, the detector will go off, and so there will be I think guidance counselors that they meet with, and they will have, each school is responding differently. It's very, very new, so the response is varied, right? One of the places that I'm working with, they have a tiered
These aren't like smoke detectors. These are a little bit more sensitive.
These are more sensitive, and they're detecting vapes. I don't... My job is actually to find out how exactly they work, and like how they can be equitable. Part of what I do for my own personal way of running a coalition, and many people do this as well, but how do you make everything equitable? How do you make it so that we're not really targeting one group over the others? Because what happens if 3 students walk in, one is vaping? How do you kind of see who that is, right? That is something that many people they know about, and we work together just to figure it out. So I'll offer education, like interactive modules to go over vaping, why it's bad, and what it does to your body, what it does to your brain, and they write like a reflection paper. So it's more about how do you really engage students rather than being punitive.
That engagement, do you see that it's being received well by the students?
So engagement, I would say it's different. The youth advisory board and the youth that I work with who are already actively doing after school programs, if my energy is well and I'm engaging and I'm interesting, it's received extremely well. If I'm talking about something that they're relating to, it goes over really well. The thing with substance use prevention is that it can be a dull topic for many youth. But the way that I make it interesting and engaging is to connect it to something that they actually do care about, and they don't really see that substance use touches it, right? So sometimes I'll do mental health. A lot of the times I'll do mental health. But sometimes I'll also do like financial well-being, right? What does substance use over a long period of time do to your financial well-being, financial health? And we go over what their short-term and long-term goals are. If many of them want to go to college and they're assuming that they're going to go, they want a sports scholarship or they like doing sports, how does that affect? How is that affected
Or
by
even potentially
smoking?
affect it, right?
Right.
Yeah,
How does that affected by smoking or alcohol use? And we'll talk about that in a way that interests them. One of my youth, they want to they want to go into medicine and they want to like work. They're interested in like heart function. So I'm like, how is heart function affected by smoking and drinking, and what does a healthy heart look like versus an unhealthy heart? So we'll talk about that in a way that's I try to get to know them individually and have it engaging for them. The youth who are already caught using substances, it's a conversation that's a little harder to navigate because you have to gain their trust first to understand why they're using. I truly don't believe that many youth who are using very actively over a long period of time are simply using it because it's fun. Oftentimes you may find like an underlying mental health, so they get referred to somebody else, or like stressors in life. Yes, a lot of the times it might be curiosity that starts them, but then that feeling that you get by being high or being drunk is the people seeking that. It's not necessarily just for the fun. Sometimes that I see.
Then they become dependent or addicted because the nicotine and
Right.
vaping is still it's
highly addictive.
Highly addictive, and then next thing you know, it's usually that old phrase, but next thing you know, they can't do without it.
Yep.
And what I learned yesterday too is during the meeting is about the duration of the impact of something. Let's say you showed a video or you had a talk and they said, wow, that has an impact on me. Mm-hmm. But it only lasts a few weeks. A few weeks later, they go back to the same behavior. So this requires constant reinforcement.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
Especially with a teen, because going back to the development of the brain, not fully functional till 25.
Right.
You're in the attention, the short attention span of all of us, but particularly with teenagers, is you think, okay, wow, I made an impact. Wow, that was a really effective meeting, session, information, and it was for those next 2 weeks.
Yeah.
But then what?
Exactly. That's the issue that you run into. So it's a lot of what I really try to build is a very strong sense of intrinsic motivation to not. That is a challenge and that's why I meet with my youth weekly and we do like some kind of programming educational, but I also have them do like remote work during the week. So it's constantly reminding them. And so what people do with like social media, it's like you put out something every day. It really is. If you look at social media, like algorithm-wise, you have to put stuff out every day, multiple times a day, sometimes in multiple different ways. That's exactly how you have to do this kind of education if if you really want it to stick. And maybe when they're like older, you have to do it less frequently. But now I really do see a necessity to consistently, continually reinforce this in their minds.
And this is important to say because but for parents and back to the mentor,
right?
Okay, whether again you're a coach, you're a teacher, you're a parent,
right.
You're a friend,
right.
Whatever your mentor category is, to pay attention to the need for constant reinforcement, because you're right. Oh yeah, watch this video. Listen to me speak. It doesn't last.
Yeah,
and so I think that's important. One, for people to know connecting to their teen is important, but number two, to be constant about it.
Yeah, so sometimes what I do also, I have parents who have a teen, but they also have a younger kid.
Yeah.
So we work on developmentally appropriate conversations to have with maybe an 8-year-old versus a teenager versus maybe someone who, like your kid who's 18 and up. Those are important. And it's the same thing with us. If we see a video that's very, very impactful, you leave being like, I have to be more mindful about how I live and I'm so grateful. Like, there are just moments where I think, like, you smell the grass a little bit more, you see colors a little bit more brightly, but it does go away. Like, you forget a little bit.
Take things for granted.
Right? And
Yeah.
you see these, like, dangerous things happen maybe on videos or in real life. Like sometimes when I see a little car accident, I am much, much more mindful about how I drive. But then, maybe 2-3 weeks, a month later, if I'm running late to work, I might be more compelled to drive like a little bit fast over the speed limit. But it's same with youth, and maybe even at a higher rate. The constant reinforcement is not because they don't care. I think that's where we get it wrong. It's like, oh, they're trying to do they're actually potentially engaging, or they're being interested in engaging with substances. And I'm like, do you not care about what I just said 2 weeks ago? Do you not care? No, they care. They actually just need more reinforcement, just like we do, right? And I personally think that we need to give more autonomy and credit to the youth. Doing that, respecting them, understanding that they are complete, like, autonomous beings that will benefit from the reinforcement, that's what really helps them.
It's a couple things here. One is, you're right, we talked about, and I think it's extremely important, that the mentorship and the connection.
Right.
Okay. But also, too, who the youth, and we're talking about teens here,
The teens.
are listening to, they're listening to each other.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And we had a nice chat with Ananda Lennox from the CARE Coalition, and that came up quite a bit. And they said, that's interesting. So how do we, through the Youth Advisory Board, which is a good example of maybe if certain teens aren't going to listen to the parents, teachers, and so on, if they can listen to each other, and I think it's important. So talk a little bit about the Youth Advisory Board, what you do, and how effective that is.
Yeah, my Youth Advisory Board is fairly new, but it is based off of the fact that peer-to-peer conversation and those are the ones that are not only taken the most seriously, but because they engage with each other on a day-to-day basis, it is kind of reinforced. You are the 5 people you hang around most. And so if the 5 people that you hang around most are just kind of averse from substances, you don't necessarily need to talk about it, but you just aren't going to be near them anyways. My advisory board, they will talk. They get a little bit of a lesson, and then they have a conversation, a discussion with each other. It's all going to culminate to a project that they do, like a poster presentation that they will present in October, and it's going to be by the youth, for the youth. Another thing that has been really, really helpful is that I have started to do youth workshops, particularly at the Impact Center in Springfield, which is another division of Gandara, which is, I think I forgot to mention that before, but it's the Impact Center is run by one of my, like, amazing colleagues, and we do monthly workshops, but then 2 weeks later we'll do a debrief. We'll do workshops. I partner with a youth who has had experience with addiction as well as recovery. The youth that I work with has been part of the Impact Center for years. That's what gets them paying attention. They know it's like the person I co-facilitate with is Ken. They listen to Ken, and then because they listen to Ken, they listen to me, right? Because Ken can engage them, we'll have very robust, like, hour-and-a-half long conversations. And then I also get questions about, hi, I really want to live a healthy life. How can I do that? Or I'm really struggling in this aspect. How can I do that? And it wasn't just me. I wasn't just this, like, really open person, and that's not the only thing that got them. They were able to trust me with some of their hardships because Ken was there for them and Ken was there with them.
And in some cases, I would think you or Ken or others that work there become that mentor that teen is looking for.
Yes, exactly.
Yes, right.
And so over time, when you're able to build those relationships, they'll just go to me, or they'll refer a friend to me. And then because peers listen to peers, that friend is already going to listen to me. And if I'm able to, again, build more of a connection, you get something that is so much more than just telling a teen what not to do.
Yeah, it's true. Now, before we wrap up,
Yeah.
I want to mention that, and because there's so much that the Gandara Center does, and if you want to learn more, go to the GandaraCenter.org.
Yes.
And through there, you'll have all the information about the Impact Center, about the Stop Access Coalition, and all the things that are happening in there. And if you want to get either involved, learn more, find out, it's GandaraCenter.org, right? But you have an event in October. Who is this for? Who attends it, and what happens there?
It's for community members, prevention. It's for everyone.
So who can go?
Everyone can go.
So if you want to learn about prevention, there's an event
in October.
In October, where is it?
Location is to be determined, but it will most likely be in the Springfield Family Resource Center.
And I know, well, I'm just saying this because October's 7 months away, no one will remember.
Yeah.
However, go into the GandaraCenter.org if you do want to learn more. There's all kinds of information, and then you will see the reminders about the information for this event.
Yep, exactly. Or you can visit the Stop Access Coalition Instagram, which is just at Stop Access Coalition.
Okay. And in that event, I think there's a lot for people to learn.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
why I mentioned it.
Yep.
So, and there's a lot to learn in the meantime, going to the Gandara Center and the Stop Access Coalition on the website. But it's events like this that I think could draw people to, and they can walk away thinking, yeah, there's a lot I can learn about prevention.
Right.
As things I can recognize. We could go on. I wish we had time. But is there anything else about prevention that you think we didn't get to talk about? Any effective means of prevention that you find stand out?
Oh, I think. Well, I'll just talk about one thing.
Sure,
So we were talking about data, and so what Gandara is doing, or the Stop Access Coalition is doing, we are helping to conduct the 2024 Prevention Needs Assessment Survey. And so what that is really what the title is. We're looking at what prevention professionals need to create programming. So we look at risky behaviors. What are risk factors? What are protective factors? And one thing that I think is so important is we all use that data as coalition, coordinators, as program directors. The biggest thing for prevention, and particularly coalitions, is the connections that you have with other coalitions. The support is phenomenal here in Western Mass because we're so closely connected geographically.
Yeah.
I think we all talk about how we're very lucky. The only way that coalitions run and that they can really expand or be seen is that if they are lifted up by other coalitions. And so being involved or just understanding who is out there doing the work, because it really can never be just one person. It has to be all of us. And here in Western Mass, it really is almost all of us. We are all in many different counties doing similar or the same work. So you talk about Paul and Ananda. We do the same work in different spaces. Yeah. And I've been so lucky that it's not only very closely geographically connected, but it is the fact that we are all willing to work with each other and support each other. So coalition support matters because the work that we do, the quality of it is only as good as the amount of support that we get.
I agree. And I could see that a lot through the Hannah County Addiction Task Force and the work, the collective work people are doing there. And you're right, great group of people.
Yep.
Phenomenal.
Yeah.
Many who we've had here. And so that is really great. But I think, again, and one of the things I go back to, whether it's mental health issues, whether it's substance abuse, or the question of what to do if somebody's going through the first call to make, we've brought that up a lot on the show. And it almost doesn't matter who you call. Call someone.
Because
somebody, it could be the Gandara Center. It could be it could be a treat and recovery. It could be Compass Recovery. It could be I could go on and on. North Star. It doesn't matter. Once you make that call, those professionals there will be able to assess and redirect to what to do next.
Yep.
And don't not make a call because you don't know who to call. Just call.
Just call somebody.
Just call somebody. And there's a lot of really great people, professional people who deal with this all the time, who know how to say, you know what, stand by and get the right person.
Yeah, I think if you call and you don't even know who to call, you will get referred to the right person. Right. And Here, the right people care a lot more than just the substance use. They care about the person, and something that we do here, especially at Stop Active, but probably coalitions, like many coalitions, is care about the person.
And if there is something that you want to know more about, what's happening maybe in your family or about prevention, the Gandara Center is not a bad place to start.
Yeah, it's a great place.
But there isn't a bad place to start.
Right.
It's just getting that start is the important thing. And that one phone call could lead you anywhere, but it's somewhere better than you are now when you're not actually speaking to somebody about something, these types of experiences. So, Anaamika, it's great having you here. There's so much to talk about prevention, and I think we can dive in a little bit more in the future, because I do want to zero in on some of these things. Prevention is so important. Then you wouldn't have to deal with all these other things.
Right.
Like you said earlier, I want no more homelessness. I want no more drug use.
I don't want any of it in our society.
Well, we'll see if we can get to where you want to be.
Right.
But thanks again.
No, thank you for
time,
having me.
Sure, to come on. And again, it's at gandaracenter.org. And thank you very much for listening. We'll see you all soon.